The river that forgot its name. The dawn mist hung over the rice paddies and bamboo groves, softening the world into shapes of green and blue. In this quiet morning light, a slow river wound through the valley, its waters murky and still, no longer the clear song she remembered. Tori. Aiko, a girl of 12, sat on mossy stones at the river's edge, her bare toes skimming the cool water. She breathed in the earthy scent of wet grass and watched ripples spread from her fingers. Somewhere upstream, the first golden rays of dawn brushed the peaks of the distant hills. Aiko's basket lay forgotten beside her as she gazed at the river. Her black hair, tied in a loose braid, tickled her damp shoulders. A single fish leapt from the water, silver scales glinting, then splashed back down. Aiko clapped her hands in delight, but the fish was the only one she'd seen. She missed the bustle of river life she had heard of in her grandmother's stories. The river seemed silent now, as if it had lost its voice. Footsteps approached along the narrow path, crunching dry leaves. Taro, a freckled boy with a wide grin, bounded down the bank with a net in hand. "Aiko," he called, waving the net like a pennant. "Wake up, sleepyhead." Aiko smiled at him. "Good morning, Taro," she replied quietly. She stood up, brushing the dew from her faded cotton tunic. "Did you catch any bugs today?" "Only mosquitoes," Taro said with a laugh. "They're too fast for my net. The dragonflies are gone." He looked around eagerly. "You see any fish yet?" Aiko shook her head but pointed to a battered tin can stuck on a reed. "I saw a goldfish under that bridge," she said. "But that's all." Taro's face fell. He sat on a log by the paddy field and picked at some soft moss. "It's strange," he said, almost to himself. "Last year the river was full of fish and fireflies. I even saw a great white heron dancing by moonlight." He turned to Aiko with wide eyes. "The big willow tree, you remember? The heron stood on the rock there, silent as the stars." Aiko bit her lip. The old willow tree by the riverbank was bare of new leaves today. In spring, it would burst into bright green, but now it sagged, old and tired. "Yes," she whispered. "I remember it too." The two friends sat together in silence for a moment, listening to the slow drip of water from Aiko's shoes. At last, Taro gave a small shrug and stood up, wiping his hands on his shorts. "Come on," he said. "Oba-san will have tea ready soon." His voice turned cheerful. Aiko nodded. Though they both felt a little sad, they looked forward to the warm kitchen. They walked side by side along the narrow village path. The morning air was cool, and Aiko shivered when a sudden breeze came off the water, carrying the faint scent of mud and pine. The village houses huddled close together on either side of the path. Here and there, smoke curled from chimneys. In one yard, chickens pecked at grain on the earthen floor. Soon, they reached the garden of Obazan, who was tending her herbs. Basil, mint, and other green shoots rustled as the old woman worked, and a few bright marigolds nodded at the corner of the fence. Aiko and Taro called out softly, "Good morning, Oba-san." Oba-san, a gentle old woman with hair as white as lotus petals, stood up and smiled. "Deva momitori melimono yawakai chime deleaki dekai transe." She wiped her hands on her faded blue kimono. "Ah, good children," she greeted them. "Come inside. It's chilly. I'll put the kettle on the hearth." Inside the cottage, warm light and the dry scent of wood smoke wrapped around them. Taro sat on a soft cushion by the fireplace, and Taro perched on a stool. Oba-san poured fragrant ginger tea into small cups and handed them over. The tea's gentle heat filled Aiko's palms and then her belly, banishing the morning chill. "You two look thoughtful," Oba-san said as she settled by the low table. Her fingers traced the floral pattern on the lacquer surface. "The river has got into your heads again, hasn't she?" Aiko and Taro exchanged glances. Taro nodded slowly. "Yes, Oga-san," he said. "The river feels different, quieter than it used to be." Oba-san took a slow sip of tea and nodded as if she expected this. Her eyes had a faraway look as she said, "Rivers are patient. They flow on whether we notice them or not. But sometimes even patient things feel sad if we forget to listen." Aiko swallowed some tea and coughed softly. She remembered stories from long ago. "Cousin," she asked gently, "do you know the river's name? Did it ever have one?" Alasan's fingertips stilling on her cup, she stared into the amber tea, swirling inside. For a moment, the room was quiet. "My child," she said after a while, "so many years have passed. I grew up hearing the river as an old friend, but its name is like a soft dream I can't quite hold on to." She looked at Aiko, eyes kind and a little sad. "Names, Aiko, give life to spirits. If we forget the name, it's as if the spirit has slipped away." Aiko's heart was strangely heavy. In that moment, looking at the kind wrinkles around Oba-san's eyes, she decided she would not forget. "Children," Oba-san said, "it's almost time to start cooking. Off you go and start the morning chores in the fields." Tara stood and yawned. He offered to get firewood from the shed. Aiko helped wring excess water from her long braid. They left Oba-san and walked back outside. Aiko paused by the doorway and looked once more up the stream. For the first time, the river seemed less like a mirror and more like a story, one she felt determined to remember. By midday, the sun climbed high and the work in the fields was done. Aiko took a clay jar from the kitchen, filling it with cool river water for the afternoon's cooking. The walk back to the bank was quiet, the only sounds the hum of dragonflies and the gentle lap of water against stones. Aiko knelt by the riverbank to rinse the jar. The water felt surprisingly warm against her palms, though the day was still fresh. As she touched the water, she heard something, a soft whisper that fluttered through the reeds. She froze, listening. The sound was like a voice, very faint and far away. It drifted on the breeze. A single word. Aiko. Her own name, or a dream of it, sighed from the river. Startled, she looked around. Was someone else there? The bank was empty, the river still. The mountains stood silent in the distance, just the water moving quietly over stones. Aiko's heart beat faster. She called softly, "Who's there?" The breeze shifted, stirring the surface. For a moment, Aiko thought the water took shape. A face, pale and watery, looked back at her in the jar. She caught only a glimpse of sad eyes, full of mist. Then the image broke apart as fish disturbed it. Aiko gasped, nearly dropping the jar. She gasped again. "I must be imagining things," she said aloud. The voice, the eyes, it was just wind and reflection. But in her stomach, something fluttered. The river had seemed to speak her name. She shivered. Was the river lonely? Aiko stood and took a deep breath. Her gaze fell on a water lily drifting close to her. Aiko touched its petals. In her palm it glowed, releasing dozens of tiny lights like fireflies drifting upward. She laughed softly. "I'm silly, imagining magic," she murmured. Yet her fingertips still tingled. On the grass nearby lay a single white feather, soft as a cloud. "A sign, maybe," she whispered. Curious, she walked upstream a little, following the feather. It lay at the foot of a gnarled willow tree. Under its drooping branches was a shallow pool, almost hidden by rocks. The river here moved slowly, reflecting gold and green leaves. Aiko knelt beside the pool and dipped the feather into the water. Ripples spread out. Suddenly, the surface flickered as if a breeze passed just there. Another face appeared, gentle and pale. The girl's expression was wistful, her eyes full of both welcome and pain. She mouthed a word that Aiko couldn't hear. "Aiko," Aiko whispered, and the figure seemed to acknowledge her voice. The girl's eyes filled with sorrow. Tears fell from her cheeks into the water and vanished. The river spirit's face trembled. "I am so tired," it whispered, voice cracking like glass. "I don't know who I am." Aiko's heart clenched. "River?" she choked. Are you the river spirit?" The figure nodded slowly, though it was only water and mist. "My name is lost. The children of this village, they forgot me. Without my name, I have no voice." Aiko felt tears on her own cheeks. "No, I heard you," she sobbed. "I promise I will remember your name. I will remember, I swear. Don't go, please. But the image trembled. The river spirit sighed and began to fade, dissolving into the mud and leaves. Please, remember, she whispered, for I remember you. And the faces in the water winked out like nothing had been there. Aiko fell to her knees at the water's edge, shaking. The river's roar changed to a hollow echo in her ears. All she could hear was her own gasping breaths and the sudden silence where the spirit had been. From somewhere upstream, a single mournful cry echoed against the hills. The great white heron. Aiko looked up through tears. In the gray sky, a white heron was perched on a broken branch near the water. Its wings spread out as if to steady itself. His eyes were fixed on Aiko. It made one long cry, a sound of longing and farewell. Then, with a final graceful beat, it lifted into the clouds and drifted silently away across the water. Aiko raised trembling hands toward where the heron had been, feeling utterly alone. The river had spoken, and then it was gone, leaving only questions. She sobbed quietly into her palms. I won't forget, she whispered into the emptiness. I will remember. In the late morning, as the sun struggled through gray clouds, Aiko returned to the village. She ran to the river and found Taro waiting with a small wooden rake. "You can help," he said softly. They gathered May, who had her papers and charcoal, and even Oba-san walked steadily with Aiko's arm around her. "I have an idea," Aiko announced. She looked at the water, still moving but much calmer. "Let's clean what we can and give the river a name it can remember." The four worked together. Aiko used a net to scoop trash from the shallows, while Taro picked up floating bottles and cans with the rake. Obasan gathered river plants that had been washed away and tucked them gently back into the earth at the bank's edge. May sat nearby on a stone, drawing in her sketchbook, the scene as it unfolded. Mr. Sato appeared with two other children, quietly taking nets. No one spoke much. The river's new name was like a secret song they all shared in their hearts. By afternoon, the riverbank looked brighter. The water ran clean and clear in places, and fish fins flashed back among pebbles. The bamboo leaves had been set right along the edge, and new shoots were tucked into the wet soil where old plants were torn loose. Aiko stood on the bank, wet up to her knees, and smiled. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Around her, the villagers nodded. Their hands and clothes were dirty, but their faces were calm. As the sun broke through a cloud, a butterfly alighted on a reed, and birdsong returned to the bamboo grove. May showed the others her final drawing. On the page, the river spirit appeared surrounded by swirling lily pads, and above it, Aiko had written a new name in curling letters. Nagomi. Aiko took a deep breath of the clean, cold air and stepped barefoot into the river once more. She placed her hands on the cool water and softly said, "Nagomi." The river sparkled under her palms. For a moment, she thought the word would float away like a feather on the current, but then she felt a tiny ripple of acknowledgement. That evening, lanterns lined the river's path. Aiko and her friends stood together by the gentle flow. The river's voice was nearly silent now, but Aiko could swear she heard something at the edge of her hearing, a soft whisper that finally found its way back home. She smiled at the clear dusk sky and let the noise of the village surround her with warmth. The night was calm. The old river had not sung like before, but it had its name again, and that was enough. Aiko felt something new inside her, the realization that she could make a difference, and that memory could awaken even the deepest sadness. And as she walked home under the starlight, the river beside her seemed to chuckle quietly, its song returning one note at a time. Nagomi, after all, would always remember.